Well, Ted, I'm excited to have you on. This is the power of social media. Usually I've seen people come through different platforms aside from LinkedIn, but here we are recording on LinkedIn. We've got a mutual connection, and I found out we also share a mutual condition. But before we get into this episode, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're up to, and what I like to ask guests is, what makes you want to tell your story on a podcast or even publicly?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. First of all, yeah, my name's Ted Fleming. I am the founder and former CEO, but board member today of Partake Brewing. We make non-alcoholic craft beer. One of the pioneers and innovators in the space, going back to actually to 2013 when I started the first non-alcoholic bottle shop in North America, and that was related to a condition I had, Crohn's disease, going back almost 10 years prior to that. Just a little bit more about me on a personal level. I'm a father. I'm a dad of three fantastic young girls between the ages of 8 and 14. They play a big role in sort of some of the transformations that I've gone through as an individual, and becoming a parent's a huge motivator to get your life into a good spot and be a great role model for those young kids and now young adults making their way in the world. So that's a big part of my story. And then also I'm an avid sports enthusiast. I think our mutual connection came through a sports club that I'm a member at here in Calgary. Growing up playing squash, but also like a lover of playing ice hockey, playing pickleball as well, that I'm trying to get into as I get a little older in age, and some of those other sports are a little harder on the body. So, that's just the 101 about me.
I appreciate you sharing. Yeah, just the comment of kids. I've got two kids, and when you've got kids and you want to maybe run around with them, or even just have enough energy to read a story to them, it really just reshapes how we think about our health and life. And someone who lives with Crohn's, that's the condition we mutually live with. There can be complications and there can be struggles with that. And before maybe get into that, I'm curious. We were connected through a mutual connection on LinkedIn, and my friends said, "Hey Tim, you got to talk to Ted," and you were very vulnerable, and you have been quite open on social media. Um, as a CEO of a company and a growing company and a fast growing company, balancing how much you share versus talking about that business. Talk to me through that. What makes you want to share this aspect of your life?
Hmm. Yeah, like early on, my journey into the non-alcoholic space was really around two things. It was around Crohn's disease and wanting to eat eat and drink healthier, live a healthier life, and it was also motivated by becoming a father, as I said before. So I had two really strong motivating factors, and for me, my journey with Crohn started back in 2005, and I was in my mid 20s when I was diagnosed. And for people that may not know, there's sort of two. You can be diagnosed with Crohn's disease at any age, but there's two general age ranges where most people are diagnosed, and that's in your early teens and also in sort of your mid to late 20s, early 30s. And I consider myself lucky that I got through my teen years and my early 20s without the condition. I really feel for those that end up with it earlier, and I can't imagine going through high school and all the things that a teenager would have to go through to manage Crohn's, in addition to all the other challenges of being at that age. So in some ways, I consider myself fortunate for it to have manifest itself later in my life. That being said, it was still several years of trying to figure out what that meant. And the first few years were me being somewhat in denial about, hey, I'm a top flight athlete. I'm strong. I'll ignore it like I do most other things, and most other aches and pains or injuries. You just kind of play through it. That was the mentality back at that time, and I kind of took that approach to Crohn's, and it was a very very bad approach for something like that. And I didn't make make some of the changes that I maybe should have. But again, becoming a father, having some more acute issues for me, particularly around fistulas in my disease, um, they motivated me to make some of the changes. And to your question about becoming more vulnerable, like that story has always been part of um, my business narrative since 2013 when I started that non-alc bottle shop, and then evolving into Partake. It is still today a point of differentiation. So there's a marketing benefit for that, but I think and we used to have the story, at least an abbreviated version of the story, on our package. And I got some great feedback from people that were going through similar things, whether it was with Crohn's or colitis. But we had a lot of great feedback from um, people, or I wouldn't say great, but thankful feedback from people that were going through other health conditions, and saw my product as a way for them to keep some degree of normal in their life when all this other stuff was changing for them from a health perspective. Um, but I think more recently, as I've been able to open up on social, the feedback loop on that is so much faster, and I'm getting everyday feedback of people who want me to share more of their story, who are telling me that, hey, that's a motivator. I didn't realize that you've been dealing with this, being a father, um, dealing with this health condition. I also have diabetes as well now, unfortunately, so dealing with quite a few things on a personal level, and still being able to grow a very successful business and have a lot of impact as an entrepreneur. So, just that more recent and more frequent feedback I'm getting is opening up my mind to how I can tell that story even more frequently, and in different ways that just support people.
When we first connected, we had our first chat just planning for an episode. One of the things that really stood out to me was, hey, I don't want to use this story just to say, look at me, and use it as that self-serving of like, look what I've overcome, and make yourself the center of the story. And I think that stood out to me because I have heard from others who also struggle or try to balance that of, hey, I want to tell my story, and I don't want it to say, well, look at all the things that I've accomplished, and but I also feel like we need to let go of that pride a little bit and say, yes, this is what I've overcome, and this is a struggle, and use that as a motivator. And so, how do you balance that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and something that it's an evolution for me right now. I think it will change over time, but I think for me, just the feedback I'm getting more recently on social is telling me, hey, do say more of that, tell more of that story, go deeper. Tell us about when you were in the hospital and what you had to do. Tell us about what you had to give up. Tell us about the hard choices you had to make about, hey, I can't go to this conference because I'm just, I'd love to go, but I'm just not feeling up to it. And for me, one of the most stressful periods as a founder of a fast growing company is we've had to do quite a few financing rounds, and those are extremely stressful. And I think for me, a big tool was the self awareness that, hey, look, this is an extremely stressful time for anybody, let alone people that have underlying conditions, hidden conditions. And so um, just taking some preemptive steps to say, hey, this is the extent of the role I can play, and I need the help around me to do this effectively, or else I'm just gonna burn myself out, or I'm gonna set myself back from trigger a health episode. And so as I've gone on, I've just developed more awareness around when do I need help, and being willing to ask for it.
Yeah, that self-awareness, that vulnerability, I think it's, for me, it's key. And done now over 50 podcast episodes, multiple interviews, and that's a common theme, is getting to that place of self-awareness. And it takes work, and it takes, I believe, telling your story maybe a couple times over and over, and embracing that. Because I say often, and even on my website, that this is my normal. My normal looks different than your normal, and so why shouldn't I be able to share my normal with people? And you live with Crohn's, and as you said, now diabetes. Your normal is different, and even though we share the same condition, your normal is different than my normal.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to step into that, embrace that, and use that to fuel, in your case, your business.
Yeah, and Actually, I had this conversation with someone yesterday that we were talking about gluten and celiac disease, and how you can go down a fairly prescriptive path in terms of like how do you treat that and deal with it. And she asked me about Crohn's. Is it the same? And I said no. Like what works for me could be very different from that next person that also has Crohn's, and it's a very individualistic condition. And I imagine colitis is as well. So um, yeah, you have to. It's a tricky disease for that reason, that there has to be a lot of self experimentation. There's not one prescriptive path that you can go down and say this is going to work, and I know it's going to work, and it's tried and true. There's a lot of experimentation that you need to do as an individual with Crohn's, and that in and of itself creates a lot of stress, because you don't always know what's going to work and what's not, and sometimes what doesn't work, it doesn't work a way that's negative to you. So um, I'm over 20 years having Crohn's at this point. I think I have a pretty good handle on what works for me and what doesn't. And just being in the industry I'm in, people say, hey, should people not drink? Is that a big factor? And I'd say it's probably a benefit to not drink for just overall health. It's been a big impact for me on my individual condition, for sure. Huge correlation between alcohol consumption for me and flare ups of my condition. However, I'm not going to say that that's going to be the same experience for the next person. So um, that's sort of how I approach it. Of hey, look, we all got to figure out what works for us, and that takes some time, and it takes some focus to get there.
Well, it's embracing your story and being able to share your story. I encourage. That's how we're going to end the stigma. That's I'd encourage anyone with a condition. If you're struggling to share your story, don't even know where to start. I said this to somebody yesterday. I was coaching somebody and said, just start in the mirror, just practice it, and because you don't know who your story is going to impact. And yeah, and I think watching your journey, specifically on LinkedIn, and now watching your business, it has an impact, and it opens up conversations that others might be afraid to enter into. Maybe because they don't know the questions to ask, or don't know where to start. But that's the power of a story and sharing our story. And you're absolutely right. What works for you is likely different than what works for me. And I had somebody just recently trying to prescribe me their own thing that they found on social media. It's like, oh, this will cure your Crohn's. I'm like, I don't think so, but I appreciate your effort. And you touched on one thing. I just want to shift a little bit, because you said a word that I think we need to explore, and that word is stress. You are founder, former CEO, board member now of Partake Brewing, multiple fundraising rounds, building a business. I saw you on what was it, Dragon's Den, and which is like the Canadian version of Shark Tank, and an incredible amount of stress. And for me, like, since my last surgery, any little bit of stress, it feels like I'm just like, oh no, something's bad's happening. So what's your secret? And I know it's, we can't prescribe something here, but how do you manage, and how do you level set that stress level to ensure that you're still, quote unquote, healthy?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm not. I wouldn't call myself a guru. Like I've gone through multiple bouts of burnout over the 11 plus years I've been a entrepreneur. So um, I think some of the learnings though are um, kind of being aware of what's coming down the pipeline, and taking some preventative measures around that. Um, I had a really tough year in 2022, just like that first year after COVID kind of opened up. There was a lot of pressure to travel, both for business and for personal, just having not seen a lot of relatives and been sort of cooped up for the prior couple of years. So that took its toll on me. So today, like just understanding, like, hey, I gotta manage my travel load. Um, I got to be comfortable saying no to stuff. I've said no to a few things that I have a tendency to say yes, as do many entrepreneurs, to pretty much anything that comes across your pipeline. And you start looking at your weeks ahead and saying, oh, do I really need to do that thing or this thing that I committed to? Being more comfortable saying no, and just kind of being able to ease things back, albeit I got to get better at not saying yes quite as much, as I have before. Um, but I'd say overall, the big thing for me is exercise, and I think for me that's twofold because I get my exercise largely through playing sports, playing squash, playing hockey, playing pickleball. Um, and I think the benefit of sports versus like I swim and I bike as well, which are sort of solo endeavors. But I find the sports are really great because you get the exercise, you get those endorphins from that, but it's also very social. And as an entrepreneur, your time is at a premium. As a father, your time is at a premium. So I find that your social life gets very very small. It's very focused on family and it's focused on business. And then without sports, I don't think I would have much of a social connection outside of those two groups. So I think that's been an incredible an incredible tool for me in my toolbox to manage stress. So I'd say that's the main thing. And I'd say even those solo endeavors, they're great to just take your mind off of things, or to maybe even if you have your mind on a problem, you're kind of able to look at it differently if you're doing a 10K run than if you are just like sitting at your desk spinning on something. So exercise has been a huge component of my stress management um, ability. And then yeah, I would say I'm getting better at it, but am no means perfect in just managing my schedule and saying no to things. But I think that being able to prioritize and not overcommit yourself, I think is a component that I'm getting better at, but still a work in progress.
Yeah, protecting that time. I'm terrible at it. My wife often will say, like, "Why are you so stressed?" And I just open up my calendar, and she's like, "Why did you say yes to all this stuff? Like, stop saying yes." And but I don't know about you, but for me, if I'm feeling good, if I feel like my guts are behaving and my energy level is up, I just got to go. And then it's that cycle of almost burnout where you're feeling good, so you just push, and then you don't feel good, and then you got to cancel everything. And so finding that balance, and it works differently for everyone. But I like that. When you say playing group sports or sports with other people, the word community pops in my mind. And again, that's another theme that is emerged out of all these episodes, is having that strong community. And I'm curious, with the people that you play sport with, are you open about living with Crohn's disease and diabetes, and how you've navigated that?
Yeah, I generally am. Like, it's open in public, it's on social, it's part of the marketing story of the brand, because it is truly part of that brand story. And why it's important to me and a lot of our customers. I am open about it, but not, you're trying to always walk that line of like, I don't want it to be in your face. I don't want it to define me. It's part of who I am, but it's not all of who I am. And I find a lot of people, if I'm going out to a social event, they'll ask me, okay, what are your dietary restrictions? What restaurant should we go to as a group, because we know you have some limitations. So I find it's the community aspect is really inclusive and encouraging, and a lot more so than it was when I started. I would say 10 years ago, not with my existing friends and family, but with new people I would meet, I'd say, okay, I don't drink, or they'd see that I wasn't drinking at a social event. And, oftentimes people would, they would think they were being humorous, and they'd say, oh, are you an alcoholic? And no, I wasn't. But at the same time, it seemed like that's a very weird and forward question to ask anyone anyways. Is it that strange not to be drinking? And it I think for most people it was strange to be around people that weren't drinking when they were. So I think we've come a long way as a society. I think we're much more inclusive in terms of um, community. I can go out and, without even telling them that this is a part of my life and part of my business, and if I'm not drinking, instead of that question of, are you an alcoholic, I'll get the question of, oh, or the comment of like, oh yeah, I did dry January. I was feeling great. Good for you for not drinking. Oh, I did sober October, and we're recording this in October today. I did that. That was great. Good for you. Like it's more, um, you'll sometimes still get a derogatory comment, but on balance, they're positive and they're aspirational and, supportive. So it's the community today is so much bigger than it was before. But I would also say that community of people who didn't drink for various reasons. I was an important part of building that community for them through my online store and really building that first iteration of sort of the non-alc community that's much more vibrant and inclusive today.
Yeah, you go to restaurants now and you see a lot of menus, a lot of drink menus now include non-alcoholic options, and it's people like yourself who wanted to, not no pun intended, partake, but to participate, to be involved, and maybe they've given up alcohol for a specific reason, but still enjoyed that social aspect, the flavor, the taste, the different profiles of beers, and you came in and filled that gap. So I just want to pivot because I think it'd be a disservice to not talk about, the business and the passion you have for this space. And, you've seen this market evolve. You've got your story, your health journey story to support that business. And where do you see Partake going from here?
Yeah, good question. And yeah, like I'll talk a little bit first about sort of my transition out of being CEO and now being a board member. Like that does have something to do with my health and the addition of diabetes to Crohn's and the stress that comes from growing a 30 plus person business with a lot of expectations and a lot of growth around it. We're obviously in a more competitive category now. When we started, it was like Partake and maybe one or two other brands across North America, and today you're seeing a new brand pop up every week. And I think the origin story of Partake, just by itself, is a huge differentiator. Like we've been in the category since day one. We were almost a creator of the category, and we're in the category for the right reasons. Like I was in the category when people said this isn't going to work. There's no market for it, and my response was, well, this I'm doing this for my community. I'm not doing it about the money. If the market evolves, which I do expect it will, that's great. We'll benefit from that. But I'm doing this today because it's important to me and it's important to my community to serve them and give them something that the rest of the market isn't doing for them. And so we built the business early based on that really, really small but passionate community. And then as we went through COVID and people probably overdrank quite a bit, at least that's the story I'm hearing. And then,
Uh-huh.
as we came out of COVID, people started to recognize, hey, maybe I'm drinking too much. I've got an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. Health and wellness became a much bigger theme, and we started to see people explore non-alc, and a lot of people came to Partake and saw, hey, this is a brand that's been here for a while. It has pedigree. It's in the market for the right reasons. Like consumers today, they can see through all the kind of celebrity branding and all these other tools and tricks that big multinational companies can bring to market. So they're looking for brands that are authentic. We're as authentic as they come in terms of why we're in the marketplace. We have some of the best product in the marketplace, having won world beer awards for multiple years, awards in Germany and Asia, for the quality of our product. But then also, like, we're doing it at a 10 to 30 calories per can level, which is pretty much unheard of in the category. Most of our competitors are 60 to 100 calories a can. So our customers like to joke, hey, we can drink a 6-pack of Partake for the calories that are in one of these other non-alc beers. So that's a lot of fun, and it wasn't actually a consideration when I developed the product early on. Obviously, now that I have diabetes, it's a great benefit because with low calories come low carbs. But yeah, it's as a consumer, it's a great time because there are a lot of new options out there, and it's a great time for exploration. But I think a lot of customers, they always seem to buy Partake as part of that exploration, as being sort of one of their go-tos, and there's a lot of reasons why.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And it's with transition comes different opportunities, and so I'm excited to see where where this takes you as you transition out of CEO. And yeah, it's a highly competitive market, where you go to any grocery store, even your pharmacy now, and you see, you see Partake and other non-alcoholic beers. But for me, what draws me to you and the product is the story behind it. I think that's in this whole landscape of products out there. Drawing yourself to that story makes an impact. And for me, it makes me want to support businesses like yours who aren't just there for greed, right? Money's a byproduct of creating a product for people like yourself, or people who may have that unhealthy relationship with alcohol. As a leader of a big organization or a growing organization, you have to balance that sharing, like, hey, I live with Crohn's disease and now I live with diabetes, with like, hey, we got to lead this company. And how have your team embraced your condition? But also, as a leader, how have you created space for others to open up about their conditions if they live with one?
Yeah, within the team, I think I think it's valued by, I don't know necessarily what every condition that every person in my organization has. I know a few. I think my openness makes them feel comfortable about their own situation and being able to be open about that. And I think we're an organization, because of my story and my situation, that has a lot of empathy for people that um, have hidden conditions. So um, I'm open about that. I hope that opens the door for others to be open about that and say, hey, look, hey, manager, I'm not feeling it today. I've got, I have this condition. Can I take a half day, or, stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that? I think we are a more open organization because of that. And, going outside of the organization, I hear that from other people on social, that, they feel more empowered um, to talk about their condition, and be open about, hey, today I'm great, let's do it, pile on the work. And other days it's like, hey, I just need to slow it down, or take the day off to recover. And there's the physical component of that, but there's also the mental health component of that, which is obviously a big issue in business today. And um, yeah, it's I draw a parallel in sports to, the NFL and concussions. Like, it just, the mentality. And I was talking about my mentality when I was first diagnosed, of being, okay, just suck it up and push through. Today it's like, yeah, you get a minor concussion, it's concussion protocol, sit out a few games, sit out a week. And I think that approach is coming to business, but I don't think it's fully there yet, where people may be burnt out. And the mentality, I think, in business is still push through. And I think, me sharing my story about my conditions, but also, maybe a little bit more on burnout, and I've seen some other founders open up about that online. I think, we'll eventually change the conversation and make businesses and business leaders more aware of the harms and impacts of that.
Yeah, the number one thing that I believe, and it's also, I think, backed by some research reports out of Accenture and a few of the big ones, is that when we create a space for people to feel comfortable to share, if they want to share, if they choose to disclose, people with disabilities outperform those without. People with disabilities stay longer. People with disabilities, if we employ people with disabilities or conditions, disability used as an inclusive term, organizations actually, the data shows that they outperform their competitors. They outperform the market in terms of revenue and profit. And so there's a business case for it. And then I get organizations now reaching out to me and saying, how do we start? And it's by sharing your own story. Sure, I could come in and I could tell story, but think of the impact organizations can have if somebody, a CEO, somebody on the C-suite, a senior leader, will come up and just say, hey, this is what I live with, and this is what works for me. So if you live with something, come talk to me. Come talk to us. We want to support you. Uh, Creating that type of environment is wildly impactful, not just for your own, if you all you care about is revenue and profit, it's good for that, but just as a great place to work. And so, I appreciate you sharing your story, and not not just a story to say, hey, I live with Crohn's, but also like, hey, this is how I've managed it in my business and building a business. And as we look to wrap up, I'm curious. A couple questions here is, you know, we think about the stigma of invisible conditions and invisible disabilities. How are we going to end this? We think, for me specifically, I think of my kids, and I think if they grow up, and if they live with something or develop something, how do we create a place for our kids to not feel shame and judgment and fear for sharing?
Yeah, and I think in my journey, earlier on when I was diagnosed, I wasn't an entrepreneur. I was working in a corporate setting, and yeah, there was certainly fear about what that, there's fear about what it means, big picture. There's fear about what it means career wise. Do you want to disclose it? Do you want to hide it? Will it, I felt like, and this might be more perception than was reality, but it was perception nonetheless, was that, hey, this is going to impact my career. There is a promotion that I had applied for that I didn't get. And, in my mind, that was because of, oh yeah, Ted's missed 3 weeks in the last year because of medical conditions. So, I think opening up about it and making it a safe conversation for both managers and employees, I think is really important. I've seen some organizations that, they have a lot of great DEI language in their hiring practices, but there's only a few that I've seen that have said explicitly, hey, or if you have, a disability, whether a visible one or not, and just acknowledging that there are a lot of conditions out there that are not visible, and you can't just say, you can't just point to because you see it. um, I think that's an important element of HR culture and business culture that I think needs to evolve. And you're starting to see the early shoots of it, but it's not broad based from what I've seen. So I'm encouraged by that. But these types of conversations will certainly help. And I also think that there's a lot of great transformational stories. My story is one of transformation. I hear it every day about people who've given up alcohol for months to years and how transformative it is in their lives. And I think opening up this conversation for people with invisible conditions, I think will be transformative for them in the long run. And I encourage anyone listening, any business leader, or any employee, to help with the cause and bring this up as an open conversation within your organization.
Yeah, bring it up open through that lens of curiosity and authenticity, and starting the conversation is where change happens, right? I think that's where, understanding your story and partake of, you're not drinking, you still wanted to be involved, and you created this whole category for yourself to be in, and a product for your community, which now has, entered across the nation into lots of different stores. And I just see that as just, incredible inspiration, right? I was talking with somebody just recently about, we wake up in the morning, we can either choose to, I'm simplifying this, and somebody might not agree with it. We wake up and we can choose to say, I live with this condition, that's it, my life is done. Or we could say, I live with this condition, what's next? And I know it's very simplistic and there's a lot of factors that play into it, but saying, for me at least, hey, I live with this condition, it's not going away anytime soon, so what's next? How can we embrace it? What kind of change can we start? What kind of conversations can we have? And somebody who's listening to this specifically, somebody who's maybe afraid to tell their story, or who's wants to tell their story, or afraid to, how could somebody start to share?
Yeah, I think it's important also to recognize that, given what you said, like, even for me, and I'm sure for yourself, like, you can go through many months where you wake up with that, hey, let's work through this, let's conquer this condition, it's not going to hold me back. But there are going to be times where it does physically hold you back. And I think we all need to give ourselves grace around that, and space and time to heal when the time warrants. And that's not, I've looked at that as a weakness, but I'm trying better to not look at it as a weakness. It's just a reality of my condition, and embrace it, um, and have it as part of my narrative of overcoming that. Yes, even though in general I'm overcoming, there are going to be challenges along the way, and those need to be faced with new rigor and resolve, and new ways of doing things. So, I think that's part of the story, is just being able to give ourselves the grace we need, and acceptance that we're going to have good days and we're going to have bad days, and that's not a function of us and our willingness and our desire to achieve. It's just our reality. So I think that's an important part of all of our stories. But to your question of like, how do we start to tell that story? And social's a great place to do it. But before that, before going kind of broadly public, start telling it to your friends, family, maybe that next layer of acquaintances, and become more comfortable telling your story. I've been doing it for many, many years, so I think it's hard for me to tell someone just to go out and tell your story and put it on social media. I don't think that's for everyone, but I think it's important to kind of start to tell your story, and develop your own narrative and what it means to you, and start with your friends and your family and your closer acquaintances, and build out from there. And not everyone will do it publicly like I've done, but if you at least have your close supporters on board, I think you'll get a lot of support from there, and you can see where it goes.
That's an idea that's been in my mind for quite some time now, is just even that story framework. Where do I start? How do I start this? So, it's kind of rekindled that idea in my mind, and something I took a note on and put some effort into. And Ted, I really appreciate you coming on. Your story has captured me, and has made me just want to keep pushing, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your raw honesty. Hey, for someone who is new to non-alcoholic beer, Partake particularly, specifically, which one should we try? Which one is like, hey, you've got to try this non-alcoholic beer?
Yeah, great question. Well, I love them all. They're all my babies. But our IPA was our first ever product. It's pretty widely available. So if you're an IPA lover, that's obviously a fit. Our blonde is a great sort of entry level beer, lager, light lager in style. And then for people who don't like beer, which there's a few of those out there, we have a peach goza, which drinks actually a little bit more like a seltzer, and it's a really uh, well received product, particularly when it's nice warm weather out, which unfortunately we're moving away from here in Canada. But if you're in the U.S. South or traveling down there, it's a great product too.
Oh, I love that. Ted, where can people find you if people have questions, people want to hear a little bit more, want to connect with you? Where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, I'm really active on LinkedIn, as you mentioned, so I'm pretty responsive there. Happy to connect with anyone. Happy to be a sounding board, whether it's for business or for health conditions. There's definitely lots of people I talk to about things personal or business. I'm happy to help in many circumstances. So please get in touch with me there. From a business perspective, drinkpartake.com is the website for the business. You can get our products across North America through that, and through major retailers across North America as well.
I appreciate that. I'll have all the links in the show notes, and yeah, if business leaders are listening to this, or maybe you're an employee and you want to subtly pass a great episode to your business leader, pass them this one, and have them reach out to Ted, and really specifically on how to build a great business that embraces disability inclusion. And so with that, Ted, appreciate you coming on. And for those who are listening, I appreciate you all. I appreciate for all the comments that continue to come in. And but I have a favor to ask. Could you send this episode to one or two people in your network? And if possible, have them subscribe to the show. That just gets Invisible Condition Podcast into more and more people's ears. So we are on all major streaming platforms, as well as on YouTube. And so, that's just kind of my selfish ask at the end. And with that, I hope everyone has an amazing day. And Ted, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Tim.